first of all, I'd like to convey my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of this event for inviting me to present a keynote address here. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Dia Damajanti, Vice Rector for Admission, International and Partnership and Career of Telkom University, Dr. Bambang Setia Nugroho, Dean, School of Electrical Engineering, Dr. Sijit Yuwono, the Head of Electronics Engineering Bachelor Program and the Chair of this conference, and my fellow speaker, Dr. Muhammad Reza, Country Manager Indonesia of Slovenia. Okay, thank you, and let me begin my speech today. Okay. So, briefly, I'm going to share my knowledge. We have done some research projects at Universiti Teknologi PETRONAS. I'll give an overview of what is happening in terms of the advancement in robotics, especially in healthcare. Then I'll move on to talk about the projects that we have undertaken and still carrying on. Okay, so and I'm sure there are reasons why we embark on new technologies. So there are three main drivers. One is the societal drivers, technological drivers, and clinical drivers. So if you notice, for societal drivers, there is increasing aging population, throughout the world. This is a common phenomenon nowadays. In terms of cost of healthcare, it is increasing. And how do we use technology to try to reduce that and burden in our daily life, especially for the aging society? So if you look at the technological drivers, so as you notice, increasingly there are many technologies available at our disposal, and it is fast growing. And the other important thing is that instead of having it at a clinical setting, more devices can be used at a home setting. So that reduces cost of usage. In terms of clinical drivers, there is unused recovery potential. That means there are things that is being discovered which are not being applied. And we have evidence-based knowledge. So if a patient goes to the doctor and if he's not convinced that he can get a good treatment by using certain technology, but nowadays with increasing use of data that is available for the clinicians and which the clinicians can readily make available to the patients, so the patients are more convinced that the technology can be used rather than being skeptical about the use of technology. So these are the three important reasons why we are embarking on new technologies. Now, in terms of the other important thing that we have to look into is the demographic change that is happening. If you notice, the total world population, is on the rise, obviously, okay? And the percentage increase between 2050 to 2050 is projected to be 32%. Okay, and the critical part of it is that the population over 65 years old is going to increase from 600 to 1.5 billion. It's an increase of 105%. And I'm relating this to stroke because we talk about health and aging population. So obviously there are diseases or disorders, and one of them major being the stroke survivors. So the stroke survivors from 2050 to 2030, you will notice it has increased from 33 million to 700 million. So we will notice later that how the new technology is assisting these stroke survivors. So in terms of the exoskeletons that is being used. Now, we would also like to look at the trends that are shaping the future of medicine. So there are a few fields that is increasingly being used. Let us look at some of them, and we will zoom into the robotics aspects. So, in terms of rehabilitation robotics, the advancement in terms of upper limb and lower limb devices has, is able to support the what do you call that, the patients. And in terms of therapeutic electrical stimulation, functional electrical stimulation is also being used as one of the means especially for SCI, spinal cord injury persons, because that leads to paralysis, and whereby they need to be treated. And the traditional method has not been very effective, and now they have moved on to using functional electrical stimulation and gamifying health. Okay, so now later you will also notice that for rehabilitation of upper limb or even a lower limb, increasingly interactive systems are being put in place so that the patients are motivated to use the devices and hence able to make recovery. The other things that we can look at is in terms of the internet, which has empowered the patients to be able to look at information on their own, okay? And the use of telemedicine and remote care, and rethinking the medical curriculum. Now, one of the things that I will share with you is, and I think probably some of you already know, is the robotic surgical system that is being used widely in US. I got a figure at about 2,000 units are being used in US. It's about 200 in Japan, and in Malaysia we have about 2 units. Okay, so now with the use of new technology, then obviously the medical curriculum is also being revamped to cater to the newer technology. Right. I just mentioned about the surgical system. So the surgical and humanoid robots are increasingly being used as a therapeutic device. Okay, and we have body sensors, genomic and truly personalized medicine, and medical track orders and portable diagnostics. These are some of the other trends that are shaping the future of medicine. But I'm more interested in the topic that I'm sharing with you is the recent advances in healthcare robotics. So there are few robotic devices, okay, advancement in robotics that we can use in healthcare. Let us go through one by one. If you notice, this is inside the body, okay. So we have micro robots which are being used, okay. These are micro scale. Sometimes, it can also be in the nano scale, which not as in nano scale. It's micro scale which goes into the body, and then it is being used as a diagnostic tool to get the images of the particular disorder. Okay, that is there. And we have concentric tube robots. These are small teleoperated manipulators which are inserted into the nostrils, into the body, and able to get information out of it. And this is quite interesting, and I will talk more on this. Robotic prosthesis and exoskeletons. There are about 10 to 15 major players in terms of the exoskeletons for lower limb, throughout the world. It is increasingly being used, and the other thing is in terms of even the upper limb. Upper limb, the wearable system is not there yet, but then there are rehabilitative systems available to be used in the clinical setting. And if you look at mobile manipulators, okay, clinicians can safely teleoperate mobile robots to treat patients with highly infectious diseases such as Ebola. Okay, so they need not be there in person, but then they can be at an adjacent room or something like that, and then use the mobile manipulators and remotely diagnose. Now, if you look at outside the body, the other thing is that patient simulators, okay, where you notice that 180,000 clinicians annually train on high fidelity robotic patient simulators. If somebody is totally paralyzed, and they are bedridden, okay, we have mechanisms, we have beds which are able to be manipulated, to be rotated, to go from back to front and all that, so that the patients are at ease and the caregivers are able to use these manipulators to assist them in taking care of the patients. It is there, even a full-fledged bed system. Okay. Now, in terms of mental and behavioral health care, robots can also support people with cognitive impairments, okay, facilitate neuro rehabilitation, and support wellness. The other thing is that it is able to provide companionship. If you notice, this is not only for mental, behavioral, for elderly patients or middle-aged groups, but kids with autism. Okay, so they have issues. We have come across some research at our place where they use now robots to interact with the autistic kids. So the kids are able to, we can see some improvement in terms of their behavior when they are able to interact with the robots. And physical task support robots are being used in terms of maneuverability and all that, okay, for patients. So I will be focusing on two major things, the surgical system as well as the rehabilitation devices. So in terms of surgical systems, this is a very famous system. I'm sure most of you will know that it's the Da Vinci surgical system. As I mentioned, there are 2,000 units in the US, 200 in Japan, and about 2 in Malaysia. Okay, and it's very, very expensive. And in this, okay, you notice that the surgeon retains full control of surgical instruments. So they are able to use the camera, okay, and then able to maneuver, okay, to do the surgery. And this is basically used mainly for keyhole surgeries or laparoscopic surgeries, okay, where the recovery rate is faster. Okay, it is not like a open surgery, and it is increasingly being used, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. Now, so you'll notice one important aspect of this is that it provides a 3D view for the surgeons to look into the particular area of diagnosis that you're going to carry out, and then with ergonomic designs where they are able to maneuver the surgical equipment. And it has been around since 2000, after the approval from Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America. Okay. Now, the recent phenomenon is the neuromate. Okay. This is called the stereotactic robot, where this is being used by neurosurgeons to carry out surgery on the brain. Okay, so this is it has been there since 2016. Again, it also uses 3D imaging data, and it is able to give a very precise location of the cyst or the area that they would like to operate on. Okay. As I mentioned, it is available since 2016. See, in order to operate this kind of devices, it is not an individual effort. It is a teamwork which involves between 3 to 4 people to carry out the surgery using such equipment. Okay, this is in terms of the surgical distant devices. Let me go into rehabilitation robotics. Okay, if you notice that rehabilitation robotics will be defined as a special branch of robotics which uses the machine, okay, that can help people to recover. So machine here means the robotic device itself. So just to give you an overview, of the historical perspective here, if you notice, of course, robots started off as an industrial robot and went on to orthosis kind of device, and now it has gone into what we call as a therapeutic robot. So this is just a simple overview of the manipulator arm as a therapeutic device, but then you look into exoskeletons and other rehabilitative devices. Okay, so what is the need for us to use rehabilitation robotics? Okay, now it will help the patients in terms of the motor learning, and obviously when we later we look into the upper arm rehabilitation, it is for therapeutic uses, and we are also able to assess, when you use a device, we should be able to assess the progress of the patient, and that is also being done by this device. And even in terms of the daily human activities, whether we can use such devices to improve the patients. The prevalence and incidence of disability and aging, as I mentioned earlier in my earlier slide, okay, there is an overall view, but in terms of country, you'll notice that number of people in terms of disabilities, percentage of population with disabilities, it differs from 4.3% to about 20%, and the number of elderly people also, the percentage is increasing from 12.4% to about 36% between different countries. Now, one interesting point is that you'll notice that only Japan and Korea, we have statistics on Japan and Korea, and we don't have any statistics, or rather, it's very difficult to find statistics on other developing countries or other countries in Asia. Okay, simply because I think we don't really have that kind of resource, and the rest are from the developed countries. So I think in Malaysia, I think for the past 10 years, they have used the electronic system in hospitals, which are able to now capture some data, but it is not on a regular basis like what is happening in other countries. So now I think with the advent of big data analytics, okay, and I think we as researchers, we are able to tap into that resource, and to be able to do, first, obviously in terms of getting the data analysis and even predictive analytics, okay, for certain diseases. It is possible if we can work with the hospitals, and obviously we're hoping that hospitals have such facilities. Right, okay, so now we will go into this definition of exoskeletons, whereby this device is attached to the body parts. This is not a prosthetic. Prosthetic is where a limb is lost and then we use a device, in place of that particular limb. Exoskeletons are devices that are attached to the existing impaired limbs to assist, to effect a movement. Okay, so we have upper limbs for upper arms, and we have for the lower limbs. Let us look into the lower limbs. We can categorize this into treadmill, foot plates, overground system, active orthosis, whereby, for this treadmill, a paraplegic is not able to stand on his own. He has to be hooked up, by straps and able to make the movement with the help of the orthosis that is linked with the treadmill. This is one rehabilitation device, and foot plates are being used also in a similar manner. And for overground system, body weight support follows the patient, and it also allows the natural walking. And active orthosis is what I said earlier on. It is also part of the treadmill where it is attached to the limbs so that it can make the movement for the patient, because the patient is now, if he's a paraplegic, is unable to move his limbs. So we need some kind of support, and with motorized system it is able to make the movement. So this is a typical robot-assisted walking therapy system, whereby you'll notice that obviously it has a mechanical structure, and we have actuators which is hooked up to the limbs, and we have sensors which measures the physical parameters in terms of position, force, orientation, and torque, and controllers uses sensor data to control the actuators, the speed and whatnot, and we have the patient interface where it is able to transmit the forces from the robot, and we also have the user interface where the patient is able to interact with the system in front. So with this, this is to engage the patients into some form of rehabilitation and get their muscles to strengthen their muscles. Okay. Otherwise, if you notice, it will be a manual therapist helping the patients to carry out the physical movements, by stretching the leg and whatnot, repetitive movements. And by having this kind of devices, it also eases the burden on the caregivers, whereby the repetitive work is not done by the caregivers, but it is taken over by the robotic devices. Okay, obviously the power source is part of the system anyway. Right, okay, so that is, a system, where you need to, it will be in a clinical setting where the caregivers will bring the patient and hook up into the system to carry out the therapy, okay? But what we are looking at here is exoskeleton, okay? Exoskeleton is independent, it is not a structure which is hooked up to a big system, okay? It is a wearable system with what we call as instrumented cane, which will assist them to make their motion, okay, to move about. Okay, there is a historical time as well, and they started off with in Berkeley, with a Blitz, where this was hooked up to the lower limbs, and they had a big system, to actuate the whole thing. Now, this is one of the famous systems that is available in the US. Okay, it has got the FDA approval about 2 years ago, and now earlier on they were doing clinical trials for about 8 years, and now with the FDA approval they are able to commercialize it. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, the bulk of the patients is due to, especially for lower limb, is due to SCI, spinal cord injury. Stroke, it could be probably one limb, not both. So with this rewalk, the patients are hooked up with the rewalk, and then the instrumented cane here can use that to aid the movement of the exoskeleton by actuating the motors. And obviously you will notice that most of the exoskeleton seems to be a wearable system, It's all motorized. It's not a pneumatic system. Could be a rehabilitation system that is in a clinical setting, but not as a wearable system. And this is another product. This is a product of New Zealand. Okay, they use this is a bulky system. You know, it is where you can put your foot into the exoskeleton itself. Okay, HAL 5. This was developed in Japan. It is only confined to Japan. You know, they do not export out of Japan. Okay, and this can be used for rehabilitation or for augmentation. Okay, and they use this to empower the factory workers or anyone who's carrying load. Okay, to reduce their load. Okay. We will look into some of the rehabilitation robotics for upper limb. Okay, so we have looked at for lower limb. Let's look at this. So we have a typical weight support system here, whereby we have the weight support, we have the patient interface, and some sensors. Okay, again similar to the lower limb, it is able to measure the physical parameters. And the patient interface is for the patient to interact with the system. See, these stroke patients and spinal cord injured patients, they are highly demotivated people when it comes to, when it comes to recovery. So, how to motivate them? You know, so we have to give them some sort of patient interface so that they are actively engaged, you know, with the system, without getting bored. Okay, so that is the reason why you will notice the patient interface is being used in all this type of rehabilitative system. Okay. Okay. In terms of categorization of upper limb devices, you know, we have the divided into laterality, degrees of freedom, and then individual limbs. So if you notice here, we have, if bilateral is only in terms of 2 movements, unilateral is multiple movements, and it is for either both arms. Okay, you can use it for both arms. And well, degree of freedoms, this is the number of joints that we are looking at. So you can extend from 2 degrees of freedom to 7 degrees of freedom. And in terms of limbs, you know, it could be just elbow, or it could be just fingers, you know, or it could be just upper arm. So individual devices are there for to take care of the individual limbs. Okay, so these are some of the devices that are available in the market. Okay, MIT Menace, L-Exos, Armin, and Amio Spring. Okay, and we also have the latest in terms of these two belongs to a company called Okuma, and the latest one is called the Power Spring. Okay, so these are some of the devices. Let's go into the as I mentioned, every device has an interactive system to get the patient to interact with the gaming. Okay. This is one of the Amio Spring. I will give a bit of specs on this. Okay, it provides a great gravity support system of 5 degrees of movement. You know, it has. You are able to set the gravity or the weight levels. Okay, so if a patient is having issues on moving the limb, then you can put it at the lightest load. Okay, and you can increase the load as the patient gains strength on the limbs. Okay, have kind of covered a bit on the surgical system, the rehabilitation devices in terms of upper limb and lower limb, and now I'll share with you some of the research that is being carried out at our university relating to this rehabilitation robotics. So So project 1 is called the multimodal approach for controlling lower limb exoskeleton. So when we say multimodal here, we are looking at, in order, so if a patient is affected by SCI or even stroke, what happens is that, the portion in the motor cortex that controls the limb, it is severely affected. So for us, we have to identify, which part of the motor cortex is still intact, or rather can be used for moving the exoskeleton. So for that, we use two different modalities. One is called the EEG, whereby we put electrodes on the head and then we try to get the signal strength, and we will study that signal strength in terms of the motor cortex. Now, apart from EEG, we also use the functional near infrared spectrography, where if you use one modality, in order for you to get the maximum efficiency is affected. So therefore, we use two different modalities, and we try to find the optimal localization in terms of the motor cortex. So from that optimal localization, we will be able to, now what do you mean by optimal localization? That means the location where, it is controlling the limbs, and it is, through having two modalities, it is more effective. So that is what we do. And once we have found the optimal localization, now we need to control the limb, right? So what do? We get the signals to be sent through, this is more on thought process kind of thing, okay? But BCI, brain-computer interface, whereby this will be linked to a EMG electrodes and to the device to be able to move the device. So that is pretty much how we combine the modalities in terms of the EEG, FNIR, as well as the EMG to control, okay, the exoskeleton. Now, in this, you'll notice that in terms of the green color is the EEG channel, the electrodes that we get, and for the red ones are for the FNIR source. Okay, in terms of source and detector, the blue and the red. Now, of these, this is what I mentioned by how to get the optimal localization of the particular motor cortex. So we will put electrodes, we look at the signals, and we try to get which one is able to give us the best location. Okay. Now we use 64 channel, we use 28 channel, we can also use 16 channels. But when it comes to the actual implementation later, right? So having 16 channel, is one thing is going to increase the cost. The other thing, it's going to be cumbersome to put all the 16 channel onto the head. So what we are doing now is that we are trying to reduce the whole idea of having the optimal localization is that can be reduced from 16, to at least about 4 or 6 channels, whether it's possible or not. It's still ongoing. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the block diagram of representation of how we combine the FNIRs as well as the EEG to come up with the best localization, optimal localization. Obviously, these are all the pre-processing and post-processing stage for us to arrive at a conclusion. And finally, the optimal localization will be used with the EMG to command a signal for the knee exoskeleton. So we are working on 1 degree of freedom first for the knee. So once that is successful, then we will extend it to more degree of freedom, okay, to the hip or even to the ankle and whatnot. Shall we have the Q&A towards the end, Doctor? Or do we, Dr. Suki, do we have the Q&A towards the end, or you have any questions? We just carry on. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. Now we talk about the second project. this is in terms of joint top model development for exoskeleton. Obviously, when you have an exoskeleton and it is motorized, you need to have sufficient torque in order for you to move it. So how do we get the torque when basically you are using surface EMG electrodes on your arm, okay, or even on your lower limb? We need to be able to get a joint torque model for us to be able to make the movement. Now, in literature, if you notice, this is a bit academic thing. There are three types, hill-based model, artificial neural network, and mathematical model. And basically, hill-based model is widely used. Okay, so we want to look at how can we explore one of these, and we started to look into mathematical model. Okay, and can we use mathematical model as a substitute to hill-based model? Okay, so in order to come up with a mathematical model, the joint torque model, what we do, we acquire the surface, the raw EMG signal. We go on to do the filtering, we do the feature extraction, and then we get the muscle iteration function to be included. Okay, and we kind of investigated about 12 mathematical models. Then we brought it down to 4 mathematical models, which are shown here. Okay, and need to get the fitness function. Okay, using 2 different algorithms, particle swarm optimization and improved particle swarm optimization, and to see how we can get this joint torque model in terms of the 4 mathematical models that we have used. Okay, so this is the flowchart of the PSO and IPSO. The only difference is in terms of the improved PSO is some mathematical equations that we added. Okay, some functionality. And we use the coefficient of determination to determine the final result in terms of the mathematical model. Okay, so we can see the red dotted and the green, which is the actual joint torque and the estimated joint torque. And we look at in terms of R squared, see how close are they. Okay, and this is in terms of mathematical model 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we looked at in terms of IPSO and PSO, and we found that IPSO is able to give a better results compared to PSO. So there are 2 things here. We were looking at mathematical models, 4 models from 12. We brought it down to 4, and at the same time, we were looking into the algorithm, which algorithm is producing a better results. Okay, so of all the models, we found that mathematical model 4 is able to give us a better result. Okay, now in terms of the PSO and IPSO, as shown you earlier, the IPSO is able to give a better result as well. Okay, now what this shows is that, conclusion, we can use the mathematical model, as a replacement to hill-based model to come up with a joint torque estimation model for exoskeleton. Okay. Right. The third project, I will look into the classification of human activity recognition. Okay. So this will also relate to somehow the exoskeleton later on. Okay, but we are looking at classification per se. Right. Okay. So the human activity recognition, okay, can be divided into in terms of applications, biometrics, disease diagnosis, rehab, and sports. And our aim is more on the rehab, and we see how the classification is being used here. Okay. So human daily activities again can be categorized into short event, basic, complex. So if you notice, short event would be the body gestures and transition type of activities. Basic is standing, sitting, laying, walking, running. And complex would be cooking, dancing, talking, and all that. Okay. So our aim was to look at the basic human daily activities. Okay. Right. The type of sensors to gather the data from the activities. Okay. Obviously, we have biosensors, video-based, motion capture, or we can go with wearable inertial sensors, goniometers, and whatnot. Okay. So in this experiment, we did not conduct this experiment. We did the classification using ensemble methods. Okay. But the database is from UCSI and machine learning respiratory database. But we had the acceleration and gyroscope sensor data. Okay. And we had two databases. One is about 10,000, the other one is about 6,000. And the kind of activities that was based on this database is, walking upstairs, walking downstairs, sitting, standing, and playing. Okay. So for this, these are the methods that were employed by the earlier researchers who created the database. Okay. Similar to what we showed earlier. Acquisition of raws, signal, filtering, feature extraction, and finally we go on to the classification. So the list of features that we use 17 features in terms of the signal magnitude area, smallest value in array, and whatnot, angle between two vectors, all these features to classify the activities. Okay. Now we use ensemble method, whereby we use the bagging, adabus, rotation forest, ensemble of nested dichotomies, random subspace with SPM algorithm, and as well as the random forest. And we use the evaluation performance criteria such as precision, recall, accuracy. And the findings shows that when we use the random subspace with SPM, okay, it is able to give us the best results. So you notice that there are two methods we use in terms of classification. One is the holdout method. If holdout method is a straightforward method where we divide between 70, 30 or 20, 80 kind of the data set into classifying into 20 or 80. The other one is the k-fold cross validation. This gives you a better result because it is able to this is a robust method. And we found that in both cases, random subspace SPM outperforms the other classifiers, and obviously the tenfold cross validation gives the better results. Okay. That is in terms of the first database. Second database, this is SPM with AND, and this is random subspace with SPM. So there's a slight variation for the second database. Now, when we, this is the overall for the result database 1 and 2. As I showed earlier, the N SPM, random subspace SPM, and random subspace SPM for this gives the better results. So at the end of the day, we found that random subspace with SPM is able to produce better classification compared to all the other ensemble methods. Right, I have this project where we developed or still developing the wearable exoskeleton for upper limb. Okay, so this upper arm, we have the accelerometer, the motor, the gears, and also the variable resistance. And it is a wearable system with an interactive gaming. So we developed two gaming system, serious games, which you can put in a PC and get it going, right? And we also had an option where they are able to port it in a VR box, in a phone and in a VR box. So now, by wearing this, the exoskeleton and the patient is able to interact with the system, the gaming system. As I mentioned, you have two options. Option one is to port it in a PC, or the other one is to port it into your phones, and you can just get a VR box. Okay. Now the reason is that we found that if once we develop this as a commercial system in future, we would like to give options to the patients. Okay. So if you need to buy a PC, then it is additional investment. Nowadays, getting a phone is rather cheaper compared to PC. So getting a phone and using that as part of your serious game will be a viable alternative. I will show you a video of the wearable exoskeleton in a few minutes, less than a minute. Can you click on the video, please? There it is.